You've awakened. Maybe it came after a breakdown. Maybe it arrived in silence while staring out the window on a quiet morning. Maybe it crashed into your life like a storm, shaking everything loose. You saw through it all the illusions, the patterns, the chasing. You had that moment, didn't you? That moment where it all made sense. Where everything you were taught to believe just crumbled. And for a while it was powerful, even euphoric. But now there's a silence, a stillness that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels hollow. You wake up, but there's no pull to get out of bed. No urgency, no spark. It's like your soul turned the volume down on life and forgot to turn it back up. And you're left wondering, where did it go? Where did the passion go? The drive, the hunger that used to push you forward. You thought awakening would give you more clarity, more joy, more aliveness. Instead, it gave you nothing, just space, just stillness, just a strange kind of emptiness that no one warned you about. You're not sad. Exactly. You're not depressed in the clinical sense. You're functioning. You're moving. But there's a part of you that feels missing. And the worst part is that no one talks about this. No one tells you that awakening isn't a rise into light. It's a collapse. It's the death of everything that used to make sense. Your job, your goals, your relationship, your identity, they no longer feel like home. You walk through life like a character in a play who's forgotten their lines. The scene is still moving. Everyone else is still acting. But inside, something in you has stepped off stage. You're watching life more than living it. And it's not because you don't care. It's because you don't know what's real anymore. You used to chase things: success, approval, progress, purpose. You used to have a fire. You used to have a list, a plan, a reason. Now, you just have questions. And the biggest one of all, the one that whispers in the background, louder with each passing day, is this: why do I feel so numb? Now that I finally see the truth. This isn't depression. At least not in the way we usually define it. It's something deeper, stranger, quieter. It's like your old motivation system was unplugged, and no one gave you the new one. And the people around you? They don't get it. They say things like, you should be happy. You figured it out. You woke up, and you nod. You smile. You say, yeah, I know. But inside, it still feels like something is off. Let me tell you something no one tells you. This feeling, it's not failure. It's not weakness. It's not you losing your way. It's the very beginning of something sacred. There's a woman I once spoke to, bright, intuitive, spiritually curious. She had read every book, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She could quote them fluently. She meditated daily. She journaled. She followed every practice. And then she had what she called a massive awakening. The veil dropped. She saw through identity, ego, the chase. It all clicked. But 2 months later, she told me this: I used to cry about not achieving enough. Now I don't care if I do anything at all. I thought awakening would light me up. But instead, it left me empty. She wasn't broken. She wasn't lost. She was just in between. And so are you. You haven't failed. You haven't lost your spark. You're not behind. You're just standing in the space after the fall of who you used to be. But before the rise of who you're meant to become. See, spiritual awakening isn't about ascending into bliss. It's about descending into truth. And truth is heavy. Truth strips you. It takes your false motivations, your performative goals, your externally fed passions. It takes everything that isn't real and burns it down. And then it waits. It waits for you to stop trying to rebuild from the ashes too quickly. It waits for you to pause, to listen, to let something deeper rise, not from your mind, but from your soul. Carl Jung hinted at this long before it was trending. He didn't call it awakening, he called it individuation, the slow, messy process of becoming who you truly are once the ego has lost its grip. He said this: enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that sounds poetic, until you live it, until the lights go out and the silence becomes unbearable, until you wake up and nothing you used to care about matters anymore, until you realize that the old map you followed no longer applies. And that's the paradox. We think that seeing the truth will energize us, but for many, especially the deeply sensitive, the seekers, the introspective soul sit, does the opposite. It empties us, not because we're broken, but because our old motivation was built on illusion. And when illusion dies, there's a gap, a void. That void is where you are right now. It's not a failure, it's a threshold. And if you're in that space floating, detached, unmotivated, you're not alone. You're going through something most people can't name. A psychological shift so profound, it doesn't tweak your behavior. It reprograms your entire operating system. You didn't lose drive, you outgrew the fuel that powered it. And what comes next? That's the part no one tells you. But I will. Because what comes next isn't another list of goals. It's not a return to hustle or pressure or finding your purpose. What comes next is a different kind of flame, a quieter one, a deeper one. But first, you have to walk through this silence. You have to let it do its work. Because maybe, just maybe, you didn't lose motivation. You just dropped the old map. And what's coming next might change everything. Keep listening, because what you're feeling right now may be the doorway to the most important transformation of your life. And it doesn't begin with doing. It begins with understanding what this silence is really trying to say. Carl Jung didn't talk about spiritual awakening the way we do today. He didn't call it enlightenment or a shift in vibration. He called it individuation. And while the words may sound different, the essence is the same. It's the journey of becoming who you truly are. Once, everything false has fallen away. But what most people don't realize is that individuation doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with collapse. It begins in the dark. It begins when your old identity, the you who was chasing goals, following roles, seeking approval, suddenly disappears. And this is where the stillness begins. This stillness isn't peace. Not yet. It's the pause that comes when the ego loses control, but the self hasn't yet stepped forward. In Jungian psychology, the ego is not the enemy. It's simply the operating system we use to survive in the world. It's your persona, your social mask, the version of you crafted to meet expectations, to get love, to avoid shame. And for most of your life, that ego has been driving the car. It knew where to go. It had goals. It had reasons. It gave you a sense of self even if that self was built on fragile foundations. But awakening shatters that illusion. It breaks the identification with the persona. It rips away the scaffolding of external meaning. And without it, you're left standing in the ruins, unsure of who you are or where to go. This is not depression. It's disorientation. Because your ego system that fueled your motivation just crashed, and you haven't installed the new one yet. In that in-between space, everything feels still, lifeless, even meaningless. You don't want to do what you used to do. You don't want to chase what you used to chase. But you also don't know what comes next. You're not in crisis. But you're not exactly alive either. You're floating in a strange kind of psychological limbo. Jung understood this better than most. He warned that bringing the unconscious into consciousness wasn't a quick fix or a joyful awakening. It was a kind of psychological death. And this is where one of his most famous quotes becomes painfully relevant. Enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That sounds beautiful, poetic, uplifting, until you live it. Because making the darkness conscious means facing everything you've avoided, everything you've suppressed, everything your persona was designed to hide. It means the anger you never expressed, the shame you never faced, the grief you buried beneath accomplishments. It all comes up, not to punish you, but to free you. Still, freedom rarely feels good in the beginning. In the beginning, it feels like chaos. It feels like fatigue. It feels like apathy. It feels like that strange numbness that makes you wonder if you've lost your edge or your mind. But Jung would tell you, no, you're not losing yourself. You're losing who you're not. And that process by nature is disorienting. He even had a word for the psychological flip that happens during these transitions, enantiodromia. It's a term borrowed from ancient philosophy, meaning the emergence of the opposite. When the pendulum swings too far in one direction, it eventually swings to the other. In the context of awakening, this means your once intense drive to achieve, to act, to perform, suddenly collapses into stillness, detachment, and quiet. You go from "I must do everything" to "why do anything?" This isn't failure. It's balance restoring itself. It's your psyche saying, we've been pushing too hard, for too long, for all the wrong reasons. And now, we rest. Not because we're lazy, but because the old system is no longer compatible with the new awareness. So if you're feeling like you've lost all motivation, all passion, all fire pause, don't pathologize it. Don't force yourself to get back to normal, because normal was built on who you used to be. This stillness is not stagnation. It's sacred pause. It's psychological decompression. It's your soul creating space for a new architecture to rise here, new source of purpose, not based on ego, but on essence. And that takes time. It takes silence. It takes surrender. Most people rush this part. They try to get back on track. They panic. They hustle. They search for a new goal, a new identity, a new high. But Jung warned, if you skip this void, you miss the transformation. Because this void is not empty. It's gestating. There is something forming in the darkness, a new center of gravity. Not your ego, but yourself. And the self isn't interested in performance or productivity. It's interested in wholeness. That's why so many things that used to excite you, ambition, competition, even validation, feel hollow now. It's not because you're broken. It's because you've outgrown the fuel that powered your old life. The old fire has burned out. Now, something quieter is being born, a different kind of light. But you won't find it by trying to relight the old flame. You'll find it by sitting in the ashes. You'll find it by letting the stillness work on you. You'll find it when you stop looking outward and begin to listen inward. Because stillness, as painful as it is not punishment. It's preparation. It's what happens when the soul is doing its deepest work behind the curtain of your awareness. So if you're here wandering through the aftermath of awakening, don't panic. You're not lost. You're in between. You're not lazy. You're in liminal space. You're not done. You're just beginning. And this stillness, this unbearable quiet, it's not the end of the path. It's the space where the self is preparing to speak. And when it does, everything will change. There's a moment in every transformation where you feel like nothing is happening. You've let go of who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. You're in between. And that in-between space, it's not quiet because nothing's happening. It's quiet because everything is, deep below the surface, away from the noise of goals and achievements. Beyond the reach of logic or action plans, something is stirring, but it feels like stillness. It feels like being lost. It feels like the absence of everything you used to cling to. You're not inspired. You're not productive. You're not yourself. But what if that's the point? What if losing motivation is not a mistake? What if it's a necessary unraveling, a sacred disintegration? You are the caterpillar dissolving inside the cocoon. Your old structure has melted. Your old self is soup. You are no longer the creature that crawled, but you are not yet the one that will fly. You are, in every sense, becoming. And becoming is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's terrifying. Because in this phase, nothing outside of you makes sense anymore. You question everything. Your path, your purpose, your worth. You wonder if you've made a mistake. If you've gone too far. If awakening was even real. This is where many people quit. They try to go back to the job that never felt right, but at least paid the bills. Back to the relationship that offered comfort, even if it lacked truth. Back to the old identity, the old fuel, the old distractions. But something's changed. Even if you try to go back, it doesn't fit anymore. It's like trying to put on clothes that no longer fit your body or your soul. And that's when the real panic sets in. Because if you can't go back, and you don't know how to go forward, where does that leave you? Here, in the void, in the cocoon, in the fire between death and rebirth. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that the ego doesn't let go quietly. It resists, it protests, it whispers lies. You're wasting your life. You're falling behind. You're being lazy. You'll lose everything. This voice isn't truth. It's fear. It's the old self trying to survive inside a process that requires its death. But death, in this context, is sacred. Not physical death, psychic death, the dissolving of old constructs, of borrowed beliefs, of identities that were never truly yours. And when that ego starts to panic, it will do everything it can to pull you out of the stillness. It will scream for movement, for action, for escape. But here's the paradox. If you act from that panic, you miss the very thing your soul is trying to show you. Because this isn't a problem to solve. It's a rite of passage to endure, and you cannot shortcut a rite of passage. You can only surrender to it. There's an ancient truth buried in every myth, every hero's journey, every transformation story. Before the return, there is descent. Before the light, there is darkness. Before the rebirth, there is the underworld. The hero always enters the cave, not because they're weak, but because the treasure is hidden in the dark. And this stage, the loss of motivation, the floating, the numbness, the existential fog, this is your cave. This is your underworld. And there's gold here, not in doing more, but in becoming still enough to see what's really been running your life. Because when you stop doing, you start seeing. You see the fear beneath the ambition, the emptiness behind the applause, the wounds hiding under the drive for success. And in that seeing, something shifts. Not all at once, not with fireworks, but quietly, subtly. You begin to feel what is real, what is true, what actually matters. And none of that truth can be rushed. It has to rise from within. So what should you do when you're in this space? Nothing. Feel. Wait. Watch. Let the dust settle. Let the old stories fall away. Let your nervous system remember what peace feels like. You don't need to perform. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to go back to normal. Normal was never your destination. This space, the stillness, the silence, the lack of motivation, it's not exile. It's initiation. You are being initiated into a deeper version of yourself, into a relationship with truth, not performance, with essence, not ego. And the only way through it is through it, not around, not above, through. So breathe, be where you are, and trust that your soul knows what it's doing. You're not failing, you're being purified. You're not broken, you're being rewired. This phase doesn't look like progress, but it's laying the foundation for everything real, everything lasting, everything aligned. Don't rush it, don't resist it. Let it do its work. You are in sacred territory now. And yes, it's lonely, it's confusing, it's vulnerable, but it's also holy, because this is where the false burns away. This is where your real voice begins to return, not as a shout, but as a whisper. You don't need to find your spark. You need to let it relight itself from the inside. And that takes time, presence, courage. So remember this, every sacred story has a descent. Every hero has a cave. Every caterpillar has a moment of becoming nothing, so they can become everything. This isn't your end. It's your baptism. And what's coming next will be more true than anything you've ever chased before. You don't have to go back. You don't have to reignite the old fire. You don't have to chase what once moved you. Because the truth is, your motivation system didn't fail. It evolved. What once pushed you, fear, ambition, the need to prove yourself, that belonged to the ego. And now, something else is waking up. Something quieter, something deeper, something that doesn't scream. It whispers. In Jungian psychology, this is the emergence of the self. Not the self as identity, not the self as personality, but the self as essence, as center, as truth. The self doesn't need a reason to exist. It doesn't rely on achievement to feel worthy. It doesn't chase, it expresses. Where the ego was always performing for the world, the self is simply being. And from that being, action returns. But it's a different kind of action. Not anxious, not performative, not exhausting. It's aligned, effortless, clean. You feel it not as a push, but as a pull. It doesn't demand urgency. It offers clarity, and you begin to notice. You want to create again, not because anyone's watching, but because it feels right. You want to move your body, not to burn calories, but to feel alive. You want to reach out to someone, not to get validation, but to share presence. These are signs that your system is rebooting, not with old code, but with soul-led intelligence. You begin choosing differently. You say no to what no longer fits, not out of rebellion, but out of peace. You find yourself drawn to simplicity, to depth, to resonance. And when you act, it feels like remembering, not performing. You don't need external motivation because your movement now comes from within. This is what Jung meant by living from the self. It's not about figuring everything out. It's about aligning with what feels fundamentally true. And from that truth, life begins to move again. Not like before, not in a frenzy of plans and checklists, but in a steady rhythm, a grounded flow. You start to see that motivation was never the issue. Direction was. You weren't unmotivated. You were misaligned. And now, as the silence fades and the signals return, they come not as commands, but as invitations. They say, come this way, try this, let this emerge, follow this curiosity. And when you do, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel whole again, not because you found the answer, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. You stopped chasing the world's definition of purpose and listened to your own. So if you're here now, feeling that quiet pull, if you're starting to sense a soft yes rising from within, you're stepping into the new. And no, it may not look exciting on the outside. It might look like starting small, writing again, planting something, saying yes to less, saying no with more ease. It might look ordinary, but it's not, because it's coming from a place that's never lied to you. It's coming from the self. And the self doesn't lead you toward applause. It leads you toward alignment. It leads you toward meaning that lasts beyond performance. This isn't about giving up your ambitions. It's about transforming them. You can still build, still create, still strive. But now, the fuel is different. It's not scarcity. It's not ego. It's devotion, presence, truth. That's the new fire. And it doesn't flicker when the winds of opinion blow. So if you've made it this far, if you've sat in the silence, if you felt the stillness press against your chest, and now you're feeling something stir, trust it. Trust the quiet spark. Trust the strange pull that makes no logical sense. Because that's your compass now. That's the self. And it's here to stay. If you're walking through this fog wondering what's next, questioning everything, leave a comment. You're not alone. More people are in this transition than you think. And if this helped you name something you couldn't quite explain, consider subscribing. We're building a space for those walking the unseen path, step by step, together. Because awakening wasn't the end of your journey. It was the end of the performance. And now, the real story begins.